Earlier this week, Tesla released their second quarterly update of the year, making the halfway point and setting the stage for things to come in 2025. As usual, there were plenty of subtle hints dropped and some bold predictions made by Elon Musk. But when it comes to Tesla's best-selling car, the Model Y, we know that big things are coming, and they're coming soon. One of those subtle yet critically important updates this week has to do with Tesla's 4680 battery and a drastic change in the narrative surrounding this experimental new cell design. Tesla is saying that they have produced 50% more 4680 cells in Q2 than they did in Q1, demonstrating that the production ramp is still very much in progress. They are not slowing down yet, and even more importantly, they write that in July, the company began testing a prototype Cybertruck with in-house produced dry cathode 4680 cells. Now, why is that a big deal, and what does that even mean? Don't worry, I got you. Let's just run through some quick history. Many years ago, in the fall of 2020, Tesla held a big event called Battery Day, and they showed off a fancy new battery cell design called the 4680. Not only was it much bigger and more powerful than the average cylindrical cell, it came with the promise from Tesla that their battery innovations would lower the cost per kilowatt hour of energy in their vehicles by 56%. And we all know that the battery is the most expensive part of an electric car, so this could easily pave the way for Tesla vehicles that were much cheaper without having to sacrifice performance, or could achieve much higher performance without having to crank up the price. Tesla promised that the first vehicle to benefit from this new innovation would be the humble Model Y. All new Model Y vehicles built at the then under construction Giga Berlin and Giga Texas factories would use this 4680 cell design, which would then be packaged into an ultra-efficient structural battery pack design paired with aluminum Giga castings, and this would provide 30% more range while achieving a lower cost of production. So we all sat by and waited in eager anticipation. Long story short, we'd end up waiting for a very long time, but that wait could finally be over in 2025. One of the key reasons that the 4680 battery never lived up to expectations was in the manufacturing process, the dry battery electrode process. It's a technology that Tesla acquired in a buyout of a company called Maxwell all the way back in 2019, and if successful, it would drastically reduce the size and cost of a battery production line, which also increases the speed and volume of production. When you make a battery using the standard wet process, you add a bunch of liquid solvents to the ingredients to melt them together, then you need to dry them back out again. This wetting and drying is time-consuming, energy-intensive, and adds the complication of dealing with a bunch of toxic chemicals and off-gassing. If you could make a dry battery, then you'd eliminate all of that stuff from the manufacturing process. This proved to be a lot more complicated than Tesla had first believed. They did figure out how to make half of the battery in a dry process, the anode or negative side of the battery, which is good, but this was already the easier and cheaper side of the battery to manufacture, so it's mostly just a sheet of copper foil with graphite on top and a bit of silicon mixed in. But the much more complex and expensive cathode, or positive side, was more resistant to dry manufacturing. This is where all of the aluminum, nickel, manganese, and cobalt resides in the battery. And now, according to what Tesla just released, after nearly 4 years of work, that dry cathode problem has finally been solved. This means that by the end of 2024, all Cybertrucks will be produced with 100% dry process 4680 cells, and this change in manufacturing should allow the 4680 production volume to ramp up even faster than it is right now, making enough cells to build as many Cybertrucks as Giga Texas can handle, maybe even more cells than Cybertruck demands. Which brings us to thinking that 2025 is the year we finally get the upgraded Model Y that was promised so long ago. The structural battery pack, the 30% increased range, the lower price point. This would dovetail pretty nicely with Tesla's new promise to deliver new vehicle models in 2025 that include more affordable options. These vehicles will utilize aspects of the next generation platform, as well as aspects of current platforms, and will be produced on the same manufacturing lines as the current vehicle lineup. Tesla says that this approach will result in achieving less cost reduction than previously expected, so that means no $25K Tesla, but that does mean cheaper versions of existing vehicles, such as the best-selling Model Y, and we probably won't have to sacrifice any range to get that lower price. Speaking of the Model Y range, this has become somewhat confusing right now in 2024. Tesla is doing some weird stuff, and as usual, since they don't bother to advertise or promote any of this stuff, it can be very difficult to follow along. The Model Y sold in the USA has come in several variations over the life of the vehicle. Currently, you can buy a long-range rear-wheel drive, long-range all-wheel drive, or performance all-wheel drive. But in the past, Tesla has also sold a standard range all-wheel drive and a standard range rear-wheel drive. Here's the thing, if you own a standard range rear-wheel drive Model Y in the USA, then what you actually own is a long-range rear-wheel drive with a software lock. What Tesla's been doing for the past year or so is using the same battery pack in all of the Model Ys, but for the standard single-motor rear drive variant, they just tell the software to ignore a certain percentage of the battery pack and not allow you to access it. So what you can do if you own one of these cars or buy one on the secondhand market, you can purchase an energy boost through the Tesla app for $1,000. You can get an extra 30 miles of range, and for $1,600, you can purchase the privilege of unlocking the entire capacity of your battery pack and gaining 50 extra miles. The whole thing is pretty janky, but it does make sense. Tesla doesn't want to deal with having two different battery packs on the production floor, so they make every car the same, and then the only variable is if it gets one motor or two. Tesla does have a dedicated standard range battery pack. That's what you get if you buy a Model Y rear-wheel drive in Canada, but that's using the LFP battery cell made in China, so it doesn't qualify for the US Inflation Reduction Act. This is why if you go and price out a Model 3, which is still available with the LFP battery right now, it's actually cheaper to get a long-range rear-wheel drive after you factor in the full tax credit than it is to buy the standard range, which only receives a partial credit. But the thing about these tax credits is that they might not survive past 2025. Both Donald Trump and his running mate JD Vance have made some pretty strong indications that they will remove all of the subsidies and tax credits associated with electric vehicles and battery production if elected to office later this year, and Elon Musk supports this idea as well, saying that it will only hurt Tesla's competition and that his company will benefit from the change. Now, that's not as easy as Trump and Vance would make it appear. The Inflation Reduction Act is part of US federal law, and getting laws removed is very complicated. You might remember that Trump already tried to do this many years ago with his attempt to reverse Obamacare health insurance, which didn't work. And any motion to add or remove a law has to pass through the US Congress and Senate, which is generally a very slow-moving process. So regardless of the political outcome, the EV tax credit isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Even in the worst-case scenario, it should hold out until the end of 2025, so you don't need to panic buy a car right now to secure the discount. But it is definitely something you want to keep an eye on. As Elon Musk has now said many times, there is no Model Y refresh coming this year, but there definitely is one coming next year. We're already seeing covered and camouflaged Model Y vehicles rolling around the streets of California. One was recently spotted in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl, but you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to deduce that the refreshed Model Y, also commonly referred to as Juniper by everyone except Tesla themselves, is going to look almost exactly the same as the refreshed Model 3, also commonly referred to as Highland by, again, everyone except Tesla themselves. So there's not exactly a whole lot of suspense or surprise going on here. If anything, it does kind of appear from these new covered photos that the Model Y refresh might have a front bumper camera similar to the Cybertruck. On the Cybertruck, that front camera is necessary to avoid running over small children and other obstacles that disappear under the driver's line of sight. It's not used for autopilot because the Cybertruck still doesn't have self-driving of any kind, but it's likely that for the Model Y, this is an indication that Tesla is working on an upgraded camera system for their 5th generation of self-driving hardware. Elon has said a lot about the Gen 5 self-driving computer, now known as AI-5, but we know a lot less about other hardware that will support improvements to autonomous driving, such as additional cameras and sensors. Either way, the Tesla Model Y has always been a great car from the moment it was released. That's how it rose to become the top-selling vehicle in the world, electric or otherwise, and Model Y has never been better than it is right now. But in the future, it will only get better.